They called him Han Tae-oh, though most people only whispered his name when they were certain he couldn't hear. In Seoul's shadowy criminal network, he was the ice that never melted, the calm before devastation, the man who could end careers with a glance and lives with a phone call. At 34, he'd constructed a kingdom built on loyalty and ruthlessness. His custom-made suits concealed scars that whispered of battles he'd never discuss. Women competed for his attention. Men trembled when he entered rooms, and government officials returned his messages before dawn. He was invincible, isolated, and profoundly lonely in the way that only those at the very top understand. Nothing caught him off guard anymore. Nothing touched his heart until a distracted Kenyan server drenched him in boiling tomato bisque, ruining his $12,000 Tom Ford suit. It occurred at Midnight Rose, the upscale establishment he owned, but rarely stepped foot inside. The respectable front for his distinctly unrespectable business ventures. Tae-oh had arrived for an unannounced inspection, his mere presence transforming the employees into anxious ghosts moving through their duties. Welcome back, friends. This is Prince of Afro-Korean stories, where passion, danger, and impossible romance intersect. Please keep sharing your ideas for future episodes, and kindly like, share, and subscribe, and activate notifications, so you never miss our latest content. The dining area buzzed with controlled tension. Everyone performed their roles with the frantic carefulness of people who understood their livelihoods depended on perfection. Then, Aisha Thompson came rushing from the kitchen entrance, carrying a tray loaded with tomato bisque, her server's uniform showing signs of a hectic dinner shift, her coiled hair gathered into a quick ponytail. She'd turned her head backward, grinning at something a busboy had joked about, completely unaware of her surroundings, not noticing him until the damage was done. The crash was catastrophic. Soup launched everywhere, his Tom Ford blazer destroyed, his ivory dress shirt soaked through with tomato broth, and her paralyzed with dread. Dark eyes enormous, lips parted in absolute shock, as recognition hit about exactly whose evening she'd just demolished with cream and herbs. The entire restaurant fell deathly quiet. Even the background jazz seemed to fade. His bodyguard stepped forward, hands moving toward concealed weapons, but Tae-oh lifted one soup-covered hand. Everyone became statues. He examined his destroyed suit, then raised his gaze to the woman who'd ruined it. She was stunning in that genuine way that couldn't be purchased or fabricated. Natural elegance and rich brown skin with features that broadcast every feeling she experienced. Currently, that feeling was absolute terror. "Oh God, I'm so incredibly sorry," Aisha stuttered, snatching napkins from an adjacent table, then hesitating, uncertain whether touching him would worsen the situation. "I wasn't paying attention. I was careless. I'll cover the cost of the suit. I'll work extra shifts. You'll pay for it." His tone was measured, lethal, the kind of quiet that comes before explosions. "Do you understand what this suit is worth?" She gulped audibly. "Probably more than I earn in half a year." "Try a full year." He removed the blazer, passed it to one of his men without glancing. "You're the new server, the one from Kenya." It wasn't really a question, but she responded regardless. "Yes, sir, Aisha Thompson. I've been here 5 weeks. I'm truly—" "Stop with the apologies." He unfastened his cuffs with calculated movements, folding back his sleeves to expose forearms decorated with ink that continued beneath the material. "Apologizing suggests you'll exercise more caution going forward. Will there be a next incident, Aisha Thompson from Kenya?" Something sparked behind her eyes then, a flash of spirit cutting through the fear. "Not if I have any say in it, sir." The edge of his lips curved upward, almost forming a smile. "Excellent, because next time, my patience won't be so generous." He pivoted to exit, then stopped. "Your Kenyan beef stew needs more Berber spice, and the ugali is too firm. If you're going to represent Kenyan cuisine in my establishment, execute it authentically." He departed, leaving her standing there covered in soup, bewildered about whether she'd just received a threat or culinary feedback. During the following 3 weeks, Tae-oh discovered reasons to appear at Midnight Rose that he'd never required previously: a discussion with vendors, an intimate meal with business partners, a sudden fascination with financial statements that typically bored him completely. Each visit included a deliberate walk past the serving station, and each time he spotted Aisha. She'd absorbed his critique seriously. The beef stew now delivered the authentic heat. The ugali achieved the proper texture. She moved with an intense focus that mirrored his own approach, her instructions to other servers allowing no compromise. She belonged here among the pressure and pace, transforming chaos into order. It captivated him more than it had any right to. "You're watching her," his right-hand man Choi Min-seok observed during one inspection. "The employees are beginning to gossip." "Let them gossip. She has a boyfriend, some finance analyst. I had him researched." Tae-oh's face remained unchanged, but something frigid formed in his gut. "I didn't request you investigate her. You didn't need to." Min-seok understood him perfectly. He's unworthy of her, maintains relationships with multiple women, doesn't bother hiding it well. "Why would that concern me?" Min-seok simply grinned knowingly. Aisha first suspected trouble when David started staying late at work every Tuesday, then Wednesdays, then entire weekends. They'd been dating for 9 months, long enough that she'd relocated half her belongings to his place, short enough that unopened boxes remained stacked in his storage closet. He was attractive, ambitious, expressed all the proper sentiments about encouraging her professional aspirations. But recently, he'd grown remote, preoccupied, his phone perpetually screened down on surfaces. Reality arrived through Twitter because fate showed no kindness. A mutual connection story posted and removed within seconds, but not quickly enough. David at a rooftop bar in Itaewon, his hand on another woman's waist, his lips against her temple in a manner that eliminated all ambiguity. She stared at her screen for an extended period, sitting in the Midnight Rose staff room between shifts, sensing something shatter and reconstruct inside her ribcage. Not her heart, precisely. That would ache more intensely. This was cleaner. The collapse of a fantasy. She'd been useful for David. The interesting girlfriend he could parade before his colleagues, but never quite significant enough to meet his family. "Everything all right, Aisha?" One of the other servers glanced in, worried. "Perfect." Aisha rose, erased the screenshot she'd captured, and returned to her station. She had 60 reservations tonight and a special menu to execute. Her romantic complications could wait until she wasn't handling hot dishes. But Tae-oh observed. Naturally, he observed. He'd made it his priority to observe everything concerning her, though he'd never analyzed too carefully why. He detected it in the aggressive way she arranged silverware, the hard line of her jaw, the missing hint of contentment she typically displayed while working. "What's wrong?" he asked, materializing beside her so abruptly that she flinched. "Nothing that involves you, Mr. Han." "Tae-oh," he corrected as he had multiple times previously. She never complied, and clearly something involves you enough to attack those place settings. Aisha's hands stilled. She looked at him directly then, this dangerous person who kept entering her workspace. This individual she should dread, but somehow didn't. Perhaps it was the weariness or the betrayal still fresh in her chest, or the basic reality that she was exhausted from being cautious. "My boyfriend's been unfaithful," she stated plainly. "I discovered it 2 hours ago. I'm ending things tonight, and tomorrow I'm searching for a new place because I live with him, and apparently, I'm a fool." "Does that answer your question?" Silence. His expression showed nothing, but his eyes had turned extremely dark. "You deserve superior treatment," he said eventually. "I'm aware," She resumed her work with marginally less aggression. Doesn't make it simpler. He observed her for another moment, then performed something that surprised them both. There's a unit nearby. One of my buildings. It's vacant, equipped. You can use it. Aisha's movements froze. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I don't accept favors from men I hardly know. Especially men like you. Men like me. He smiled, and it wasn't warm. What sort of man am I, Aisha? She held his stare without wavering. The sort who's accustomed to obtaining what he desires. And yet you continue declining me. He moved nearer, voice lowering. I find that simultaneously frustrating and fascinating. I'm not fascinating. I'm just exhausted. She cleaned her hands on her apron. And I have a dinner service approaching. The apartment will be ready whenever you require it. No conditions, no obligations. Simply a secure place to recover. He adjusted his cuffs. Consider it my apology for my abysmal soup-related conduct. Before she could protest, he'd vanished, leaving only the subtle trace of expensive cologne and the sensation that something essential had transformed. Aisha ended things with David that evening through a text message because he didn't merit additional effort. He called 23 times. She blocked his number. By sunrise, she'd gathered her possessions into 4 suitcases and 3 boxes. Her entire life fitting into a rental van with space remaining. She'd planned to locate a cheap hotel, perhaps stay with one of the other servers temporarily while apartment searching. Instead, she discovered herself outside the address Tae-oh had written on Midnight Rose's business card, gazing up at a structure that was unmistakably beyond her budget. The unit was on the 18th floor, sleek and uncluttered, with expansive windows overlooking Namsan Tower. It was magnificent. It was intimidating. It was everything she'd told herself she wouldn't accept. But she was so weary of being resilient, of making responsible decisions, of pretending she had superior alternatives. So she opened the door with the key that had been prepared at the lobby desk under her name, placed down her suitcases, and permitted herself this single moment of surrender. The arrangement arrived the following day. Not roses, nothing so predictable. Proteas, bold and striking and impossible to overlook, with a note that read simply, "For fresh starts." Tae-oh began appearing at Midnight Rose daily afterward, consistently discovering pretexts to pass the serving area, to sample food she recommended, to position himself nearby while she worked. Aisha told herself she should be alarmed. Everything she'd learned about him indicated a man who claimed what he desired and eliminated what he couldn't possess. But he never made contact without consent, never intimidated, never insisted. He simply observed, anticipated, like he possessed unlimited patience. "You're tempting fate," cautioned Grace, one of the veteran servers who'd worked at Midnight Rose for years. "That man is lethal." "I understand." "Then why do you permit him to linger?" Aisha lacked a satisfactory explanation, only that when Tae-oh regarded her, she felt recognized in a manner she'd never experienced previously, like she was the sole individual in his meticulously controlled universe who mattered. It was intoxicating and frightening simultaneously. 4 weeks after she'd accepted his apartment, Tae-oh invited her to dinner. Not at Midnight Rose, a tiny, concealed restaurant in Bukchon that served the variety of cuisine you couldn't locate on any website. The sort of establishment you needed insider knowledge just to discover. "Is this a date?" Aisha asked, because she'd discovered that directness succeeded with him. "Do you want it to be?" "I don't know what I want." "Honest, at minimum." "Then let's call it 2 individuals sharing food." His smile was subtle, authentic. No expectations, but expectations constructed themselves dish by dish. He inquired about her upbringing in Nairobi, her mother who taught her about hospitality, the opportunity that had transported her to Seoul to attend hospitality school. She asked about nothing because everything concerning him felt like hazardous ground. But he volunteered regardless. Small truths presented like offerings. His father who abandoned them when he was 10, the mentor who'd recruited him into the organization, the isolation of authority that nobody ever acknowledged. "Why me?" Aisha asked over dessert, the question that had been accumulating for weeks. "You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone." He extended across the table, his fingers barely touching hers. "I want the woman who looked at me drenched in soup and saw simply a person, not a criminal. I want the server who declined my gifts and my apartment and everything I could provide until she needed assistance and was courageous enough to accept it. I want you, Aisha Thompson. I have since that initial day." Her breathing caught. "You don't know me. Then allow me to." It wasn't a command. It was the nearest thing to pleading she'd ever heard from him. And that vulnerability shattered something within her chest. "I'm frightened," she confessed, "of what you are, what people claim you do, the existence you lead. I'm frightened, too." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "Of how intensely I want this, of what I might do to preserve you, of the reality that for the first time in my existence, I value something beyond survival and control." He raised her hand to his mouth, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "But I'm more frightened of the regret if I allow you to leave." Aisha felt the final remnants of her resistance dissolve. "This is a horrible idea." "Undoubtedly." His smile was genuine now, transforming his features into something almost tender. "Do it regardless." So she did. Loving Tae-oh was nothing like she'd anticipated. He was tender in ways that contradicted everything she understood about him. Understanding with her anxieties, protective of her emotions. He never brought his occupation home, never permitted the brutality of his reality to affect her. When they were alone in the apartment that had become theirs, he was simply a man who prepared her breakfast inadequately and accepted her teasing, who dozed during films and woke reaching for her like he feared she'd vanished. But the criminal network noticed, because authority always noticed, transformation. Rumors circulated about Tae-oh's vulnerability, the foreign server who gentled Seoul's most feared figure. Competitors tested limits. His own syndicate questioned his decisions. Min-seok cautioned him constantly that she made him exposed. "Then I'm exposed," Tae-oh said plainly. "I won't surrender her." The warning arrived on a Thursday, delivered to Midnight Rose in a package marked with the emblem of a competing organization. Inside, photographs of Aisha at the grocery, commuting, working. The implication was transparent. They could access her whenever they chose. Tae-oh's retaliation was immediate and merciless. The variety of violence that reminded Seoul why they'd feared him initially. Within 72 hours, the competing syndicate had been eliminated. Its command structure vanished, its operations absorbed. It was disproportionate. It was conclusive. It was affection expressed in the Seoul dialect his reality comprehended. Aisha discovered from the television, watching coverage of organized crime violence in neighborhoods she didn't recognize, hearing his name referenced in whispers she wasn't intended to catch. She stood in their apartment, in this beautiful prison he'd constructed for her, and felt the burden of what it signified to love someone like him. When he returned that evening, she was sitting in darkness. "You know," he said quietly, removing his jacket, "the entire city knows." She looked at him, this man she'd somehow fallen in love with. "You destroyed them for me." "I'd destroy everything for you." He stated it like reality, not intimidation. "Is that what frightens you?" Aisha was silent for an extended moment. "No. What frightens me is that it doesn't frighten me sufficiently." She stood, approached him. "I should flee from you. Everything rational suggests leaving. But you're still here. I'm still here. She touched his face, felt him lean into her hand like he was desperate for it. Because when I'm with you, I feel more authentic than I ever have. Because you perceive me, not some illusion of who you want me to be. Because you're tender with me, even though your world demands you be harsh. She kissed him gently. Because I love you, Tae-oh, even though I know better. His arms encircled her, holding firmly enough to ache. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She smiled against his shoulder. Love me regardless. Always, he promised, and meant it with everything he possessed. 7 months later, Midnight Rose received recognition in Seoul's prestigious dining guide under Aisha's management as head of service. Tae-oh was in the main room when they received notification, surrounded by associates pretending this was an ordinary business dinner, watching his woman command her team like the leader she was. When she appeared, radiant with achievement and happiness, he stood and approached her before everyone. This man who never displayed affection publicly, who kept his private existence separated from his empire. He kissed her there before his world, claiming her, claiming this joy, claiming the privilege to love something beyond power. When he withdrew, she was laughing, glowing, and he knew he'd made the correct decision, that every terrible action he'd committed in his existence had somehow guided him to this moment, to her. I'm proud of you, he said, and she kissed him again. The Korean underworld learned to acknowledge what Tae-oh had understood from the start, that Aisha Thompson wasn't his weakness. She was his power, the element that made him more formidable because he finally possessed something worth defending. They constructed a life together in the spaces between his shadows and her light, not flawless, but authentic, not secure, but theirs. And in Seoul's glittering underworld, they whispered about the Kenyan server who'd brought the city's most feared man to his knees, not with weapons or authority, but with soup, courage, and love. It became folklore. The variety of story people shared to remember that even in darkness, unexpected beauty could flourish. Tae-oh never forgot the first time he saw her, clumsy and beautiful and completely unafraid. Aisha never forgot the man who'd offered her sanctuary when she needed it most, who demonstrated that love could exist even in impossible circumstances. Together, they proved that sometimes the most dangerous force in the world wasn't power or violence or fear. Sometimes it was simply the bravery to let yourself be known, to be vulnerable, to fall in love with exactly the wrong person and discover they were right all along. We've reached the conclusion of our compelling African-Korean story. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove love can heal the deepest wounds. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Your support means everything to me.